Andy Robinson felt invisible and he was glad. Nothing really stood out about him and he wanted to keep it that way. He was just a 10-year-old boy in a sea of other kids in his age group. He was a below-average student at school, but not so below average that it caused concern. He showed no particular talent for sports, mainly because he shied away from contact sports. He did enjoy swimming and had won third place in the 50-meter freestyle event in the annual competition held at the community pool last year. But, of course, third place was just slightly above ordinary. No one paid any attention to a third-place finisher. Third place had loser written all over it and Andy was fine with that. Andy was a member of a single-parent family, but that really was not unusual. Almost half of the kids in his school came from divorced and or single-parent families. The one distinguishing thing about his family, which was not something that he ever would brag about, or even discuss with anyone for that matter, was that he had no idea who his father was. Neither did his mother. Apparently, she had gone through a wild streak her final year in high school and wound up pregnant with him, not knowing which of the boys she had slept with was the father. Andy's grandmother had helped out taking care of him so that his mother could attend university. But 2 years later, she wound up doing the same thing again and his sister Sarah was born. Andy loved his mom, but making the same mistake twice? That said LOSER in capital letters. No. Andy did not want to talk about why he had no father. People might show interest. He wouldn't be invisible anymore. They might start to pay attention to him, and that was the last thing that he wanted. Despite being a single-parent family, they were doing all right. His mother had a decent job at the state university in the town where they lived, something to do with the provost's office, whatever that meant. He and his sister attended the university laboratory school, supposedly one of the best in the entire state. Being attached to the university signified that he and his sister had advantages that most kids his age at other schools did not have, such as exposure to numerous cultural activities, among other things. However, neither Andy nor Sarah really appreciated them, because from their perspective they always had been present. Rather than seeming like advantages, they viewed them either as regular fare or impositions, things that they were expected to do because they were part of a university community. Andy didn't like adhering to expectations. School was strict academically and progressive socially, or at least that's how they presented the program to parents. They had the interest and resources of the university's schools of education and social sciences, which were constantly seeking to devise new ways to engage students and to create an empowering learning environment. However, these efforts did not exempt the laboratory school from having to deal with the same issues of bullying, teasing, and hierarchical peer group interactions that plagued most schools. In some respects, these things were worse at the laboratory school. Most schools at least tried to intervene, trying to control problems through the enforcement of rules. However, the laboratory school saw them as legitimate research questions to be studied. Thus, rather than intervening, they tended to allow things to go unchecked in order to preserve the integrity of their research. This meant that problems between students tended to fester longer. Andy had a slight build and was somewhat small for his age. However, he was not so slight or small in stature as to generate concern about his physical development. Nevertheless, because of this, he was picked on by other boys at school, but not so much that it drew attention from the faculty. This was partly because he did not belong to any of the major peer groups at school and therefore did not participate in any of their rivalries, and partly because he never reacted to teasing or bullying. In fact, he did his best not to react to anything. He wanted to be like one of the many trees on campus. They existed and took up space, but no one seemed to notice them. And it was working. He was for all intents and purposes invisible, and Andy was content with that. Andy's fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Coleman, stood at the back of the classroom, observing her students as they attempted to complete the surprise quiz that she had just sprung upon them. She had been with the class long enough to pretty much predict what the outcome would be. Sally Meacham, Roberta Gonzalez, and John Chang would surely ace it. Sally's twin brother Ted, John D'Agostino, and Zach Downing would almost guarantee to fail, not because they lacked ability, but because they were part of a peer group that seemed to value failure as a mark of machismo, basically saying screw you to their female teacher. The rest would be average, with a couple of enigmas. Andy Robinson was one of those enigmas. She folded her arms and observed him. Andy was a bright boy, but a classic underachiever. She had devoted considerable energy trying to discover a way to motivate him, but thus far had been unsuccessful. Like most kids, students in her class had their good days and bad days, that is, everyone except Andy Robinson. There was no way to tell what kind of day he was having. He was just there, always the same regardless of the situation. But Mrs. Coleman knew that there was more to him. From her perspective, Andy worked very hard to be unobtrusive, almost as if he were projecting a hologram to the world and was hiding his true self from some perceived threat. But what could that threat be? Who was the boy behind that hologram? Under other circumstances, Mrs. Coleman might have suspected that Andy was a victim of abuse. He showed many of the classic signs. He was withdrawn, had a flat affect, did not seem to have any friends, and had a school performance that was below his ability level. But she had met Andy's mother, Rebecca Robinson, twice for regular parent-teacher conferences, and everything seemed fine. Rebecca was engaged in her son's life. Sure, she was a young mother with 2 children and no husband, but she seemed to be dealing with the stress, and she had expressed concern about Andy's lackluster school performance at their last meeting. "I just don't know what's going on with Andy," Rebecca had remarked. "He just doesn't seem to be interested in anything." Mrs. Coleman had tried to console her by saying that all children go through periods of apathy from time to time, and indicated that she would keep a close eye on him and let her know if it seems to be more than just a phase. That was 6 weeks ago and nothing had changed. Andy was just as withdrawn as always. Despite this, she had resisted the urge to contact Rebecca about it. She assumed that Rebecca would expect answers from her, and she did not have any. She wanted to better understand the problem. Another possibility was that Andy was a victim of abuse at school, but this did not appear to be the case either. Sure, he was teased from time to time, and who knew what went on in the boys' lavatory, but it certainly did not appear that he had been singled out for bullying by anyone. A third possibility was that Andy was hiding something that he deemed to be so horrible that he could not share it with anyone. That fit with her perception that he was projecting a holographic image of himself to the world. She had consulted a friend of hers in the psychology department at the university, and he had confirmed that Andy's behavior seemed to be consistent with him being overwhelmed by fear, either real or perceived. However, he also warned her that children Andy's age lacked the ability to exert sustained control over their emotions. Eventually, what he was hiding, if this were indeed the case, would come out, and he probably would experience difficulty with it. To be safe, he suggested that Rebecca consider bringing Andy to the pediatric psychology clinic at the university for evaluation, indicating that they might be able to address the problem before it became serious. Mrs. Coleman felt conflicted. On one hand, she was uncomfortable telling Rebecca about her friend's recommendation when she could not actually tell her what the problem is. The pediatric psychology clinic seemed extreme, and she worried that the whole thing might backfire on her. On the other hand, if she did not say anything and Andy suffered because of it, she would not be able to live with herself. In the end, protecting the well-being of her students won out. She resolved to call Rebecca later that evening. She was Andy's mother. It was her decision which option was best. All she could do was support her. "Okay, class, time's up. Put down your pencils and hand your papers forward." Andy Robinson was ecstatic, although no one noticed because he exhibited no outward emotion. Another school day was finished and he was glad to be paroled from that prison, at least until tomorrow. He hated school, but not for the usual reasons. The work wasn't that bad. In fact, he was able to pass without putting forth much effort. His teacher, Mrs. Cullen, was nice, and always wore pretty outfits that he genuinely admired. His classmates didn't bother him, at least that much. Andy hated school because he was angry and jealous. His anger stemmed from feeling controlled in every aspect of his life. He hardly had any time to be by himself and he so desperately wanted it. School was the worst part. It represented 100% control. It seemed that he always was under the watchful eye of adults. At school, everyone had their well-defined roles: teachers, janitors, cafeteria workers, professors at the university, girl students, boy students, groundskeepers, secretaries. Each role carried expectations for appropriate behavior. Everyone seemed perfectly comfortable and secure with them. And everyone smiled. The whole thing made Andy sick. In a university town that prided itself on upholding progressive ideals, he could not fathom how everyone seemed to be completely oblivious to their robot-like existence. Andy wasn't happy, but he couldn't reveal this to anyone. His world might fall apart if he did. Thus, he was just as stuck in his invisible role as he believed that everyone else was locked in their robot-like existence. In addition to being angry, Andy was jealous. He was jealous that his sister Sarah had a better life than he did. For that matter, every girl had a better life than he did. Sarah was treated like a delicate little flower, so fragile and beautiful. Lots of effort had to be expended to nurture and protect that flower. He knew that his mom and grandma loved him, but they did not give him even half the attention that they gave to Sarah. She always needed new clothes, her hair fixed, and other things. Everyone always smiled and remarked how pretty and cute she was. Andy? He was just an afterthought. Although on one level, this is exactly what he wanted. He did not want anyone to notice him. However, on a deeper level, he was starving for attention, the right kind of attention, the kind of attention that he longed to have. School was even worse. All of the girls got to wear pretty outfits, flowing skirts and dresses, beautiful shoes, and pretty accessories in their hair. Andy was dizzy most of the day admiring them, wishing that he could go to school like that, in that role. But each day confirmed that he was not allowed to be like them, and that made him consumed with jealousy. There was no room for discussion, no appeal. It was just the way things were. Andy was locked in his schoolboy role, a role that he despised. And it felt like the entire world was conspiring to keep him solidly in that role, including his family. Despite his pent-up anger and jealousy, Andy exited the school excited. Today was Sarah's ballet class, which meant that Jenna Avery would be watching him at home. He really liked Jenna. She was in high school and was a real girly girl. Andy enjoyed hanging out with her because this afforded him an opportunity to admire her lovely clothes and so watch her do feminine things, like apply nail polish and makeup. Even though this temporarily made him happy, he inevitably became consumed with jealousy, because he had to hide his desires to be just like her. Why did he have to hide his desires? Why couldn't he just be a girl? Andy had considered confiding in Jenna, but rejected it as a crazy idea. There was no way to predict how she would react. She really was sweet, but she might not be very sweet about his secret. What if she thought he was weird? What if she laughed at him? What if she told his mom or grandma? He simply could not take that chance. This also explained why he had scrupulously avoided making friends. Friendship meant that people get to know each other. Andy could not risk anyone getting to know him and who he truly was. He was a girl. But it was like everyone refused to acknowledge it. Instead, they had thrust him forever into the role of a boy, and there were expectations that crushed his spirit. The good thing about Jenna was that she did not pay much attention to him. She always sat in the living room doing homework and texting with her friends. This provided Andy with much-needed alone time. He already had hidden some of his sister's clothes in his room. He would have about an hour to truly be himself today, and he planned to enjoy every minute of it. Andy stopped and surveyed the line of cars parked along the curb, spotted his grandma's blue Toyota, and walked toward it. "Hey, Andrea! Wait for us!" Andy clenched his teeth. It was Sarah and her crazy friends Julie and Denise. A couple of weeks ago they had started calling him Andrea. It unnerved him and made him feel completely exposed. But he refused to react to their teasing. There didn't appear to be any obvious reason for Sarah doing this. He didn't tease her or play other tricks on her. It just started one day and then sort of took on a life of its own. It left Andy with the uncomfortable feeling that his sister could see right through him to his core. It was like she knew everything. In one respect, this actually was sweet. Sarah seemed to know him, appeared to have accepted him as a girl, and called him Andrea to confirm it. The only problem with this belief was that it conflicted with the fact that he was positive that Sarah did not know that he was borrowing her clothes. He always was so careful, and besides it was not that often. When she had called him Andrea, he also had taken a detailed inventory of his behavior and could not recognize anything that might make Sarah suspect that he really was a girl like her. Andy was confident that no one knew, but still felt uneasy. One thing was for sure. If he complained about his sister's teasing, his mom and grandma might become suspicious about why it seemed to bother him so much. They might start prying and paying attention to him. Eventually he would be exposed and he might be sent away forever. No. Andy would just have to put up with the incessant teasing. "Hi sis," Sarah said, as she approached. "Where's Grandma?" "Hi Andrea," the two other girls chimed sarcastically. "Over there," Andy pointed. "Well, let's go." "We don't want to be late for ballet," Sarah said. The four children ran to the car, got in, and made their greetings. "Are you girls ready for ballet?" Grandma asked. "Of course," the girls shouted. "Well, I put your bag in the trunk, Sarah. Do the rest of you have your things ready at home?" Grandma queried, peering in the rearview mirror at Julie and Denise. "I don't want to have to wait too long." "Yes, Mrs. Robinson." Sitting in the front passenger seat, Andy felt a tap on his shoulder. "Are you coming with us, Andrea?" Sarah inquired. Andy clenched his teeth again. "Enough with the teasing," Grandma chided. "You know very well that we're taking Andy home first and then we'll pass by your friends' houses before going to ballet." Truth be known, Andy longed to go to ballet with the girls, not as a spectator but as a participant in the class. However, he could not so much as give an inkling of that desire to anyone. He had to avoid being exposed at all costs. "Oh, that's right. Andrea has a babysitter." Sarah deliberately drew out the word baby for emphasis. "That's so cute," Denise said. "Jenna's going to change her diaper when she gets home," Sarah added. "Baby, baby, baby Andrea." "She's such a baby," Denise and Julie chimed, again drawing out the word baby. "I said enough teasing," Grandma scolded. Jenna met Andy at the door and waved to Mrs. Robinson as she left with the girls. "Hi, Andy." "What's up?" "Nothing," Andy mumbled. "Hey, why the long face?" In truth, Andy always looked sad, but he looked particularly dejected today. She placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you a snack and you can tell me all about it." Actually, this was the last thing that Andy wanted to do because it would cut into his alone time. But he was stuck and followed Jenna into the kitchen. She poured a glass of milk and set a plate with 3 chocolate chip cookies in front of him. Andy couldn't take his eyes off Jenna. She wore a simple flouncy skirt with a stunning pattern. It caressed her legs with every step. He wanted to wear that skirt so much and feel its soft material on his legs. He wished that he had the courage to ask her. Jenna sat at the table with a cup of tea and said, "Okay, Andy, what's bothering you?" "It's really nothing." "Well, if it's nothing, then you can tell me about it." Right? She was right. Andy felt his anxiety level start to increase. What was he going to do now? "Come on, just say it," Jenna encouraged. "You'll feel better." Andy had no doubt that he would feel better if he told Jenna what really was bothering him, maybe for a nanosecond. After that, his entire world would collapse. But she had outmaneuvered him. He had to tell her something. He looked up at the clock and saw that the minutes were ticking away. "It's just Sarah and her friends." "What about them?" "Well, on the way home they called me a baby because you are my sitter." Jenna laughed. "Is that all? I thought it was something really serious." It wasn't all, but Andy was fearful of telling her the rest. The way that she had so easily manipulated him into talking, he could not risk that if he told her about the Andrea teasing, she would get him to open up about his secret. Rather than answer, he just stared at the empty plate. "Look, Andy. That's what sisters and brothers do. They tease each other. My 2 older brothers were merciless with me. They called me Miss Piggy. I cried almost every day about that." "How could they call you that?" "You're beautiful." "Why, thank you very much," Jenna smiled. "They really didn't believe that I was a pig. They just said it because they knew it bothered me. And I teased them back. I called my brother Sam," Samantha relentlessly, she giggled. "That was it. Girls do this." Sarah wasn't psychic. She couldn't see right through him and know his secret like he had worried. It was just stupid teasing that all girls do. Andy felt relieved. "I can't explain it," Jenna continued, "but it seems to be part of growing up. Now, I'm closer than ever with my brothers, especially now that they've left home. Trust me. By next week, your sister and her friends will be focused on something else." That was not entirely true. They already had been calling him Andrea now for 3 weeks, and there was no evidence that they were going to stop anytime soon. But Andy did not want to say anything that would stretch out the conversation even longer. "Okay," he sighed. "Can I go upstairs now? I have homework and Mom won't let me watch TV after supper unless I've finished it." "Sure, Andy. You can go." Jenna began clearing the table and watched Andy as he left the kitchen. "Are you sure that's all?" Andy turned around. "Yeah, that's it." He then sped up the stairs. Jenna did not believe Andy. Something else was going on. She couldn't imagine what it was, but there was more to it than just some meaningless teasing. Andy always seemed so numb to the world. That just wasn't normal. She was worried for him. At the same time, she was torn about mentioning her concerns to his mother and grandmother. Maybe they would think that she was meddling. She liked the job and the spending money that it gave her to buy clothes, shoes, and makeup. "Why am I worrying so much?" Jenna thought. He's probably forgot about it already and is back to normal. But normal for Andy really wasn't normal. She just didn't know what to do. Finally, Andy was alone. He already had peeled off his t-shirt before he reached his room. Rushing over to his closet, he retrieved the bag containing Sarah's clothes and carefully spread each article on the bed. He then rushed to the bathroom to pee and to wash. He had to ensure that he wouldn't leave a scent on her clothes that she might recognize. Finished, Andy tiptoed back to his bedroom and closed the door. As he looked admiringly at the clothes on his bed, he gasped suddenly. What if Jenna had come upstairs while he was in the bathroom and saw the girl's clothes on his bed? How could he have been so stupid? In a state of panic, he turned in one direction and then the other. He did not know what to do. Stupid! 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 Andy couldn't think straight. The whole day was ruined. He dropped down to sit on the floor and started to cry. His mind was swimming with different thoughts. But after about 3 minutes of crying, a new thought began to take prominence. He realized that if Jenna had seen the clothes, she surely would have asked him about them. There was nothing to worry about. He was just being paranoid. His anxiety melted away. This had been a close call. He resolved to never make this mistake again. Just in case, Andy got to his feet, stuck his head out the door, and listened. He heard Jenna chatting on the phone with one of her friends and relaxed. He closed the door and set about getting dressed. The first item was the white floral cotton panties. He picked them up and felt a tingling spread from his hands throughout his body. He carefully slid them up his legs and over his privates. His PP immediately stood up at attention. Andy didn't like this part. He was quite certain that other girls did not have this reaction and it made him really uncomfortable. "Get back down. Get back down," he ordered in a whisper. When it failed to obey, he decided to ignore it, hoping that this strategy would work after a while. But, in truth, he was so excited that he hardly could contain himself. Next, came the matching cotton cami. It felt so soft and luxurious on his body. He touched the nipples of his breasts and turned to look into the mirror on his closet door. He was too young to have had any breast development yet, but he prayed every night that it would start soon so that he could be like all of the other girls. He then sat on the bed and slipped a pair of pink anklets onto his feet, followed by a pair of pink Mary Janes. The shoes were a little tight, but Andy was riding such an emotional high that he did not notice any discomfort. He stood up and held the skirt out in front of him. It was a cute photo-real floral skirt with a bright pink background and big yellow sunflowers. All the girls had photoreal skirts at school and Sarah had only recently gotten hers. Andy had been dying for the opportunity to try it on. He carefully stepped into it and pulled it up around his waist. He shivered with delight as he felt the sheer material of the skirt caressing his legs. Last but not least came the matching light pink sequin splash tank with the words Miss Sunshire written across the front in yellow lettering. Andy was in heaven as he admired himself in the mirror, turning from side to side. Everything was so soft and he felt exquisitely feminine. He walked from one end of his room to the other, carefully monitoring his every move in the mirror. He sat on the bed, crossed his legs, and pretended to be chatting with girlfriends. He moved over to his desk and sat down, imagining that he was a studious little girl doing her homework. Andy was so happy. Up to this point, he had done everything possible to ignore the little tent in the front of the skirt. His PP still was standing at full attention and aching to be touched. He felt ashamed and it put everything into doubt that he was really a girl, as he so hoped. Girls didn't have to deal with this. They didn't get all excited when they wore pretty clothes. Being in a university town, Andy had been exposed to gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people from time to time. He desperately wanted to talk to one of them about being a girl and his PP problem. But what if they laughed? What if they didn't take him seriously? Even worse, What if they did take him seriously and exposed him? What if they talked to his mom? Maybe he would be sent away and would never see any of his family ever again. He simply could not risk it. Andy felt completely alone. In his heart, he knew that he was a girl. But his rock-hard PP seemed to be shouting, no. 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 He hated himself for it and wished that it would just go away. But there it was, causing the beautiful skirt to tent. Slowly his hands began to inch toward it, almost as if being drawn by a magnet. While he hated it being there, he also loved how it felt when he gently slid the skirt material over it against his panties. He stood in front of the mirror in a daze, slowly rubbing himself, and chanting, "I'm a girl. I'm a girl. I'm a pretty girl." Over and over Andy chanted those 3 phrases. He was in dreamland. What? Andy thought that he heard something. Shocked out of his revelry, he bolted to the door and opened it a crack. "Earth to Andy," Jenna called. Yeah. Andy cleared his throat. His voice sounded rough. He hadn't been prepared for that. "Is everything all right up there?" "I'm just working," Andy called down, his voice recovering. There was a long pause, and then he heard Jenna speak those 3 dreaded words, the 3 words that struck terror in his heart. "I'm coming up." Andy did not have to worry about the tent in his skirt anymore, because with Jenna's announcement it suddenly shrank down to a pinpoint. "Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!" Andy closed the door, pulled off the tank, and then slid down the skirt in what appeared to be one fluid motion, tossing them on the floor next to his bed by the window. Thank God the skirt had an elastic waistband. He kicked off the shoes and put on his t-shirt simultaneously and then jumped into his jeans. As he was pulling them up, he heard a tap on the door. "Andy?" He went to the door and opened it, his hand shaking on the doorknob. "Why do you have the door closed?" "I had to call you 3 times. "Aw. I don't know. You know that your mom doesn't want you to close the door to your room unless you are changing your clothes." "Were you changing your clothes, Andy?" If she only knew the truth. Andy thought. No. I was, just trying to concentrate on my homework." He pointed to his desk. Fortunately, his papers were strewn out because he had been pretending to be a studious schoolgirl. "I could hear you talking on the phone and I needed it to be quiet." "Are you having trouble with math again?" Jenna slipped past him and walked toward the desk. Andy's mind went into overdrive again. If Jenna reached the desk to examine his work, she might notice the skirt, tank, and shoes on the floor by his bed. He rushed past her and stood in front of the desk, effectively blocking the view of his hidden treasure. There was a hard problem, but I just figured it out. I'm almost finished now." He looked up at Jenna and met her intense gaze. She wasn't smiling. It seemed like they stood there for hours before the tension finally broke. "Well, all right," she sighed. "Just don't close the door again and come down when you're done. Your grandma and sister will be here in about half an hour." Jenna left Andy's room and traversed down the stairs. Stopping at the bottom, she asked herself, what was that about? Andy was up to something and she was determined to discover what it could be. She did not believe the homework story for a minute. Andy rarely did homework. Most of the time, he hung out with her downstairs staring at her with starstruck eyes. He seemed to have a terminal case of puppy love and Jenna thought that it was cute. But today was different. He went straight upstairs after his snack and closed the door. She contemplated. He's hiding something. I can tell. As she thought about it more, Andy had exhibited this behavior before. He would make some excuse to go to his room, like taking a nap or reading, and then would disappear for a while. The only thing distinct about today was that Andy spent a lot more time upstairs in his room. She had not noticed if he had closed the door on other occasions, but he certainly had done so today. And what about his behavior when she went up to his room? He definitely was nervous about something. And the way that he flew past her when she was going to the desk. Was he doing something there that he didn't want her to see? Who knows? Perhaps he was writing a love note to her. This thought made her giggle. Andy was so cute. She didn't want to spoil his secret crush on her. But what if it was something else? Something that his mom should know about? Jenna decided to wait 5 minutes to give Andy time to relax. Then, she would sneak back upstairs and see if she could discover what was going on. She would try not to be too intrusive, in case Andy really was making a love note. Andy exhaled a sigh of relief. That was a close call. Much too close. He circled around his bed and retrieved the skirt and tank, shaking them to remove any accumulated dust, and laid them out on the bed again. Then, he went back and retrieved the Mary Janes. Looking longingly at the skirt and tank, he contemplated getting dressed again. He really wanted to, but he had this nagging feeling that Jenna hadn't completely believed him. Maybe she will come back up and catch me. Deep down, this is what Andy really wanted. He was so tired of hiding. He wanted everyone to know. But he was scared, petrified in fact. His mom would not love him anymore. Everyone would hate him. He lowered his head and looked at his feet, about to cry again. Suddenly, his body stiffened as if a burst of electric current were passing through it. The socks. The pink anklets. Did Jenna see them? In full panic, he rushed from one end of his room to another, with his hand squeezing his head, as if it were about to explode and he was trying to contain it. Stopping inches in front of the closet mirror, he spoke in a whispered shout to his image. Did she see the anklets? Did she see the anklets? Then, he remembered that he still wore the cami. Maybe it was visible through his t-shirt. He checked his image from different angles. Did she see it? Did she notice that too? The words screamed inside his head. Andy thought that he was going crazy. He totally was freaked out. He dropped down to the floor and pulled off the anklets. Then, took off his t-shirt and removed the cami. Finally, he pulled off his jeans and took off the panties. After putting his own clothes back on, he gathered up all of his sister's things, placed them carefully into the bag, and returned them to his closet. He would sneak them back into his sister's room later. Jenna tiptoed up the stairs. She had devised a plan that should enable her to discover what Andy was doing, while still not exposing his crush on her. She suddenly would burst into his room. If he was seated at his desk, she would assume that his activities were crush-related and would respect his privacy. However, if it was something else, she probably would get a glimpse of it. She felt a little guilty, sneaking around like this. But something was wrong with Andy and she wanted to help. He did not seem to have even a minute of happiness in his life. She couldn't remember the last time that she had seen him smile. Something had to be done, and the first step was to find out what was going on with him. Andy lay in his bed, exhausted from the stress. This had been too close. He had made too many mistakes. If he kept this up, eventually he would be exposed, and his life, as he knew it, would end. Mom won't love me anymore. Actually, he could not understand why she loved him now. He was a freak, a terrible person. No one should love him. Andy had contemplated running away numerous times to spare his mother the shame of having a child that was a mutant. but he couldn't figure out a way to leave home without making her sad. His grandma would be sad too. Andy did not want to be responsible for that. And, in truth, he really didn't want to be separated from his family. He had tried to stop dressing in Sarah's clothes many times. He had tried to force himself into accepting that he was a boy, but these efforts always ended in failure. Although he was able to suppress his feelings for a while, they always returned even stronger than before. There just seemed to be no way to control it. Andy felt as though he was living under a curse. But what kind of curse? Was he cursed because he couldn't control his desires, or was he cursed because society would not allow him to express them? One thing for sure was that he could not risk dressing in his room like he had today anymore. He had to stop. This made Andy really sad. Why can't I just be myself? Why do I always have to hide? Tears streamed down Andy's face. No one tried to understand him. No one even cared. Andy, I forgot to mention. He bolted up to a seated position. What was Jenna doing here? How did she just appear like that? Ah. Are you crying, Andy? Andy saw a look of deep concern on Jenna's face as she rushed over to him. He rubbed his eyes. What's wrong, Andy? Why are you crying? I don't know, he replied, the tears starting to flow again. Jenna sat on the bed beside him and rubbed his back with her hand. That's it. Let it out. Everything will be okay. How can you say that? Andy whimpered. Because you always feel better after you cry, Jenna consoled. She stood up, looked around, spotted the box of tissues, and grabbed a handful. Sitting back down, she handed them to Andy. Now, can you tell me what's wrong? Did I do something to upset you? No, Andy said, blowing his nose. I just laid down to rest and then I started crying. Okay. But what made you cry? I don't know. It just happened. Jenna touched his chin and turned his head toward her. I don't believe you, Andy. But it's okay if you don't want to talk about it. She ran her fingers through his hair and then took his hand. Come on. Let's go downstairs. I don't want you up here alone. We're here. Grandma Robinson called out as she entered the house through the kitchen door attached to the garage. Hi, Mrs. Robinson, Jenna called back, getting up from the couch. Sarah sped past her grandmother and made a beeline to Jenna. Hi, Jenna. Look. I learned third position today. She put her feet together and then carefully turned her left foot outward so that its heel was positioned against the middle of her right foot in a perpendicular fashion. Very nice. Jenna cheered, clapping her hands. She bent down and gave Sarah a hug. And are these new barrettes? Yup. Grandma bought them for me, Sarah beamed. They're very pretty. Andy sighed. Here we go again. The encouragement, the camaraderie between girls, he longed to be part of it. But, of course, he could not. He would forever be on the outside looking in. Would you like to see the others? Sarah said. Sure. Sarah turned and ran upstairs. No running in the house, Grandma Robinson chided. Andy? Yeah. Do you have homework? I finished it already. Are you sure? Uh-huh. That's how his life went every day. No sweet talk for him. His role in life did not allow for that. Why couldn't Grandma talk to him like she did to Sarah? Why couldn't Jenna treat him like she treated Sarah? All he got were questions about his schoolwork and the assumption that he was lying about doing it. Technically, he was lying. He hadn't done any homework, well, except for the little that he did when he was seated at the desk imagining that he was a schoolgirl. But he had no intention of finishing it. Besides, in his mind he really wasn't lying. Not doing homework was his private way to protest against a society that was so unfair. Sarah bounded down the stairs holding a card full of barrettes and handed them to Jenna. "Oh, these are precious," Jenna said. "And I know that you'll look cute as can be in each pair." She hugged Sarah again. "Can you stay and eat supper with us?" Sarah inquired sheepishly. "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie," Jenna said. "I have to go home. My parents are waiting for me and they'll be lonely if they don't see me." "You wouldn't want that, would you?" "No, I guess not. But I'll see you soon," Jenna said, touching the tip of Sarah's nose. "You have piano in 2 days." "That's right," Sarah exclaimed, bobbing up and down. "Okay, I'm going to say bye to your grandma," Jenna said, gathering her things. "Bye, Andy." "Bye, Jenna." Sarah spun and looked at Andy, as if noticing him for the first time. "Hey, Andrea. Anything good on TV?" Andy did not answer her. He still was burning inside with jealousy. At the same time, he felt guilty. He loved his sister. She wasn't responsible for his situation, but she served as a daily reminder of it. He turned to her and paused, contemplating whether or not to say anything, but then finally spoke. "Why do you keep calling me Andrea?" "You mean you don't know?" Sarah giggled. "I don't have a clue," Andy replied. "I don't call you names. I don't treat you bad. I'm not calling you names," Sarah protested. "Then what do you call it? Why are you calling me Andrea?" "Because I want a big sister like Denise." "And you're it, silly!" Sarah shouted. With that, she turned and sped up the stairs. Jenna stopped short of the threshold of the kitchen and smiled when she heard Sarah call her brother Andrea. She thought, "Sarah's just like me when I was her age." Grandma Robinson was cutting carrots at the kitchen counter when Jenna entered. "I'm going home now, Mrs. Robinson. The kids are watching TV." "Okay, thanks, Jenna. Did Andy give you any trouble?" "No, of course not. He's a sweet boy." "But..." Grandma Robinson turned and faced Jenna. "What is it?" "Well, I'm a little worried." Grandma Robinson set the knife on the counter and walked over to the table. "Let's sit down for a minute and talk." She was an attractive woman of 63 years. Although her daughter, Rebecca, had given birth to her children straight out of high school, she had not given birth to Rebecca until she was 35. And that wasn't the only way that the two differed from each other. Rebecca tended to be socially progressive, while she was more conservative. Perhaps it was just a generational difference. Rebecca liked white wine, she enjoyed red. Her husband had passed away 2 months after Rebecca's positive pregnancy test. Rebecca initially had blamed herself for her father's death, thinking that the stress associated with her pregnancy had caused his heart attack. But it really had nothing to do with her. He simply had a diseased heart and it was a ticking time bomb. After Andy was born, she took on the major responsibility for him so that Rebecca could attend university. When Sarah was born 2 years later, she did the same. Thus, they actually were a 2-parent rather than a single-parent family. "What concerns you about Andy?" she asked. Jenna sighed. "I don't know. Maybe it's nothing, but have you noticed that he doesn't talk much?" "Sure. We just figured that he is going through a phase." Grandma Robinson had an uneasy feeling. What was Jenna getting at? Rebecca talked to his teacher about it and she assured her that he's not being picked on at school. But she's keeping an eye on him just the same. That's good to hear, but... Jenna paused. Andy was crying this afternoon. He was crying? What was wrong? I asked, but he wouldn't tell me. He claims that he laid down to rest and he just started crying for no reason. Jenna picked at a cuticle. I don't believe him. No, you're right, Grandma Robinson pondered. Something must be wrong. I wonder what it could be. Do you think Jenna's teasing could be bothering him? The Andrea stuff? She chuckled. I think that bothers me more than it does him. That's just it, Jenna said. Andy doesn't seem to react to anything. That's why I'm worried. I see what you mean. Jenna was right. Andy had been withdrawn lately. Maybe he wasn't just going through a phase. I'll tell you what, Grandma Robinson said, as she rose from her seat. I'll speak to Rebecca about it when she gets home. She's Andy's mother and I don't want to make a decision without her. Okay, Jenna said. I'm sorry if I've upset you. Nonsense. Grandma Robinson interrupted. You did the right thing, dear. That makes me feel better. Goodbye, Mrs. Robinson. I hope everything works out. Jenna gave me some disturbing news today, Grandma Robinson said. Is she going to stop sitting for us? I hope we're not going to have to find someone else, Rebecca sighed, as she cleared dinner dishes off the table. Sarah and Andy really like her. She was tired. The day had been busy at work and after arriving home Sarah cornered her into watching a performance of everything she had learned in ballet class. She was relieved that things finally were winding down. Sometimes she felt more like she was 48 years old, rather than just 28. No, she's fine. The problem is with Andy, Grandma Robinson advised. Rebecca turned to face her mother. Really? What did he do? Nothing bad or anything like that. Jenna found him crying in his room today. Rebecca furrowed her brow. Oh no. A knot began to form in her stomach. Did she find out why? No. He wouldn't tell her. According to his version, he laid down in his bed to get some rest and just started crying spontaneously. That's ridiculous. Of course it is, Grandma Robinson said, scratching the back of her neck. He obviously is upset about something. Rebecca touched a finger to her chin. I wonder what it could be. I don't know, but if I were you, I would find out soon. If he's suffering, we need to figure out how to help him. Rebecca dried her hands on the towel. I'm going up to talk to him right now. She had just started climbing the stairs when she heard her cell phone ring. Rebecca? Yes? This is Beth Coleman, Andy's teacher. Oh, hi Beth. What's up? The knot returned to Rebecca's stomach. She knew darn well that something was up. Otherwise, Beth wouldn't be calling. But being upbeat in the face of stress was a defense mechanism that she used to help her get through times like this. Well, Beth sighed. I guess I should get right to the point of my call. Do you remember our last conversation in which we shared a concern about Andy being withdrawn? Sure. We agreed that you would keep a closer eye on him. I didn't hear back from you, so I figured everything was okay. But your call suggests something is wrong. That's just it. I'm not sure. What do you mean? Rebecca pressed. On one hand, she was relieved that Beth wasn't sure, but still there seemed to be something wrong. Her anxiety level was increasing. I mean, Andy hasn't changed. He's still very withdrawn and he isn't trying in class. But I'm still not sure that it's anything serious. There it was. Rebecca had noticed this too, and so had her mother. And now with Jenna's news today. What was wrong with her son? Tears began to fill her eyes. Beth, I think it might be serious. What makes you say that? Well, Mom and I have noticed that he hasn't changed too, and today his sitter found him crying in his room. Oh my. I'm not sure what to do. Rebecca felt a tear stream down her face. I might be able to help. How? Rebecca dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I spoke to a friend at the university about Andy. He recommended that you bring him to the pediatric psychology clinic for an evaluation, just in case there's something seriously wrong. Rebecca stiffened. The psychology clinic? I know. At first it seemed extreme to me too. That's why I held off calling. But Andy's not improving, and with what you told me about him crying today, I think that it might be a good idea. Children his age cry all the time, Rebecca countered. Yes. That's my point. Andy usually doesn't show any emotion. My friend said that children Andy's age cannot regulate their emotions over a sustained period. Eventually what is bothering him will surface. He implied that you might be able to avoid a lot of suffering if you catch this soon. You're probably right, Beth. I'm going to think it over. In the meantime, I'm going to try to talk to him tonight. Don't pressure him too much. Oh no, I won't, Rebecca assured. I really appreciate your call, Beth, and everything that you are doing to try to help my son. Thanks, Rebecca. Let's keep in touch. I'll let you know if anything happens at school. And if you decide to take Andy to the clinic, please let me know. Sure, Beth. Thanks a bunch. Andy sat on the edge of his bed dejected. He had just sneaked his sister's clothes back in her room. Parting with them made him feel sad, like he had just said goodbye to his best friend. Of course, he really didn't know what saying goodbye to a friend felt like, because he did not have any friends. But Andy understood that he felt sad. Andy also felt guilty about borrowing Sarah's clothes. He wouldn't like it if she did that to him without asking. But he couldn't seem to control himself. It really felt like he was cursed. Although he did not want to stop dressing, he desperately wanted to stop being dishonest about it. But realistically, how could he ask Sarah for help? On the other hand, who knew? Maybe she wouldn't care. After all, she claimed she wanted a big sister. But he could not know for sure. And what about his mom and grandma? They definitely would care. Mom had just bought him a new baseball glove. No, asking Sarah for permission to wear her clothes was out of the question. Besides, he really wanted his own clothes. It was clear that he had to be more careful from now on. He couldn't keep sneaking into Sarah's room and not expect to get caught. For this reason, when he returned the clothes that he had borrowed, he snatched a pair of panties from the back of her drawer, hoping that they would not be missed. He planned to keep them hidden in his room for a couple of weeks. Andy already had taken a bath and brushed his teeth. It only was about 7:30 p.m. and his regular bedtime wasn't until 8:30 p.m. However, he decided to go to bed anyway. At least in bed, he could express his femininity. He had his pajama top on, but slid the bottoms under the pillow. Already having put the panties on, he picked up a red towel off the bed, wrapped it around his waist, and tucked it in so that it wouldn't fall. It made a passable skirt, falling just above the knee. He modeled it in front of the mirror for a few minutes. Then, getting nervous about being discovered, he turned off the overhead light, opened the door to his room halfway, and ran to his bed and jumped in. He now was hiding in plain sight. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it was safe and he was satisfied. He wanted so badly to just be a girl, like Sarah. Free and without judgment. But society wouldn't allow it. Why? Andy couldn't answer that question. It's just the way things were. But why were they that way? Why couldn't he just be himself? Why should anybody care? Andy didn't know, but it was apparent that people did care and they cared a lot. He felt like a condemned prisoner that was serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. But what had he done to deserve it? Andy? Andy stiffened as he watched his mother's silhouette pass by his door. He heard her knock on the bathroom door. Andy? I'm in here, Mom. His mother appeared at his door and flipped on the light. What are you doing in bed? Are you sick? She approached the bed and placed her hand on his forehead. Andy wondered if he indeed might have a fever, given the degree to which his anxiety level had spiked. Do you feel bad, honey? No. I'm just tired. But you almost never go to bed on time. I always have to keep after you. What's different about today? Andy squirmed under the covers. Nothing, Mom. I told you. I'm just tired. Andy felt himself cracking under the stress. First, it was the close call with Jenna today, and now he found himself in another threatening situation with his mother. Although technically speaking he was not wearing a skirt, if his mother saw the towel wrapped around him, there would be no mistaking what it signified, especially since he was wearing his sister's panties underneath it. His mother ran her fingers through his hair. Well, you're not hot, so I guess you're okay. She took hold of the edge of his covers and started to pull them back. Come sit here on the bed with me for a minute. I want to talk to you. No! Andy shouted, pulling the covers back up in a state of panic. His mother jumped back a little in response to his outburst. Andy! What's wrong? Andy turned away from her. Nothing, Mom. I'm just tired. Andy felt terrible that he had yelled at his mother. She hadn't deserved that. At the same time, he couldn't let her see him, not as he really was. She would be horrified. His mother sat on the bed, reached over, and embraced him. Okay, big guy. Have it your way. We'll talk tomorrow. Andy started to whimper. Why are you crying, honey? He rolled over and spoke through tears. I'm sorry I yelled at you, Mommy. I didn't mean to do it. Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about that, she said, brushing away tears from his face. I'm the one who is sorry. You said you were tired. I didn't listen. She tucked his covers around him and gave him a kiss on the forehead. Night-night, big guy. Andy wanted to scream, I'm not a guy. Night-night, Mommy. Rebecca descended the stairs and went into the living room, where her mother was watching television. Can we mute the TV for a minute, Mom? Rebecca said, taking a seat on the couch. Sure, sweetheart. Did you talk to Andy? Rebecca covered her face with her hands and wept. I think there's something wrong with him and I am not sure what to do. She felt her mother sit next to her on the couch and pull her into a hug. Don't worry, sweetheart. We're going to figure this out. I hope so, Rebecca sniffled. She felt so helpless. What could possibly be the problem? Did he tell you anything? Grandma Robinson inquired. No. I went up to talk to him, but he already was in bed. That's unusual. Rebecca dabbed tears from her eyes. I know. I thought the same thing. I asked him why, but he was harsh with me. Then, he started crying. Again? Yes. That's why I'm so worried. I can tell he's upset. It's just like Beth Coleman described. Wait. Did she talk to you about Andy? Rebecca shifted to face her mother. She called as I was going up to talk to him. A friend of hers told her that boys Andy's age cannot keep their emotions bottled up for very long. Eventually it all comes out. And that's what's happening. Grandma Robinson brushed Rebecca's hair from her face in a gentle gesture. Not so fast, sweetheart. Sure, he's upset. But that doesn't mean that there's something drastically wrong. That's what I said to you earlier and you disagreed, Rebecca said in mild protest. I know. But I've thought about it more. Perhaps we are overreacting. Neither one of us has any experience raising boys. Who knows? Maybe it's something that all of them go through at this age. Her mother was right. She didn't have a brother. They both were flying blind with Andy. You might be right. Beth's recommendation did seem a little premature to me. What was that? She said that her friend suggested that I bring Andy to the pediatric psychology clinic at the university. But I feel uncomfortable about doing it. I don't know why, Grandma Robinson said. You went there and they helped you. I was 17 and pregnant. Rebecca balked. And you were emotionally torn apart. Maybe Andy is too. Rebecca stood. I don't understand you. First you cast doubt that anything's seriously wrong and now you're suggesting that I take him to the clinic. I'm doing no such thing. I'm trying to help you to understand that taking him to the clinic, if that's what he needs, is not a bad thing. I wish I knew what to do, Rebecca whined. Grandma Robinson stood and put her hand on Rebecca's shoulder. Let me try to talk to him tomorrow after school. Okay, Mom. In the meantime, I'm going to talk to some of my friends at work that have sons to see if Andy's behavior really is unusual. Good idea. We'll get to the bottom of this. Rebecca fidgeted in the waiting room of the University Pediatric Psychology Clinic. Andy had been there for his appointment earlier that day and she was anxious about discussing the results. She had made numerous attempts over the past week to get him to open up about what was bothering him, but to no avail. Her mother also had tried, as had Jenna and his teacher Beth Coleman. Nothing seemed to work. Some additional outbursts followed by crying stints expressing remorse finally convinced her to have her son evaluated at the clinic. Andy had not responded well to the news about the clinic. First, there was the word pediatric in the title, which suggested to him that she thought that he still was a baby. Then, there was the issue of attending the clinic itself. You think I'm crazy? Andy had accused, with tears flowing down his face. Rebecca was heartbroken. She had assumed that Andy would react negatively to the news that he was going to the clinic, which is why she initially had resisted making the decision. However, rather than help with the problem, it seemed to exacerbate it. Her son had become more combative since hearing the news and the emotional distance between them had grown significantly. Rebecca felt as if she had betrayed him. Still, she was worried and had to remain strong. Rebecca was convinced that something was seriously wrong and she wanted to do everything that she could to help her son. She finally was able to lower his anxiety to some degree by emphasizing that the word pediatric in medicine referred to children of any age, a fact that he was able to verify on the internet. But what finally broke his resistance was that she disclosed to him that she had attended the clinic when she was 17 and her mother confirmed it. For all of his initial protesting, Andy's appointment seemed to have gone without incident. Everything went okay, her mother had reported in a phone call. He even said that the doctor was nice. This gave Rebecca a sense of relief. However, she still was anxious about hearing the results. After about 10 additional minutes of waiting, with her anxiety levels steadily climbing, an attractive woman in her mid-40s emerged from the clinic area. Her face beamed with a warm smile as she approached Rebecca. "How nice to see you, Rebecca," she greeted, extending her hand. Rebecca rose from her seat and accepted the handshake. "Hi, Dr. Rivera. How long has it been?" "At least 10 years, Rebecca replied. How time flies," Dr. Rivera said, motioning Rebecca to follow her back to her office. Rebecca noticed that Dr. Rivera's office had not changed that much since she had been her patient. Sure, the paint and blinds were different, as was some of the furniture, but the basic elements still were present. There was the bookcase lined with manuals, books, and other reading materials, pictures of family thoughtfully peppered throughout the office, and her framed diplomas. Dr. Rivera took a seat across from Rebecca and said, "I know you're here about Andy, but I have to tell you. This meeting has a very pleasant nostalgic feeling for me." "I specifically requested you," Rebecca said. "I know you and I trust you. Our sessions really helped me." "Thank you very much, Rebecca. It gives me great satisfaction to see that you have grown into a beautiful woman and wonderful mother." "Well, that's just it," Rebecca said, picking at a cuticle. "I don't feel much like a good mother these days." "Don't be so hard on yourself," Dr. Rivera consoled. "You recognized a problem and brought your son here to address it. If that's not being a good mother, I don't know what is." Rebecca looked up. "Do you think that I could be the problem?" "Let's get into that," Dr. Rivera said, shifting in her seat and crossing her legs. "Your mother explained to me the reason for bringing Andy to the clinic during our pre-conference, but now I'd like to hear it from you." Rebecca squirmed in her chair, trying to get comfortable. "Well, in a nutshell, Andy's withdrawn. He doesn't have friends. Overall, he just doesn't seem happy." "I see. Tell me more." "Well, lately he's been crying a lot more than usual. His teacher at school also has noticed that he's withdrawn, as has his sitter. We thought that it might just be a passing phase, but he hasn't improved. He seems to be holding something inside, but I have been unable to get him to talk about it. I'm really worried." Dr. Rivera breathed deeply. "Have there been any disciplinary problems?" "No. Not really. Except..." Dr. Rivera leaned forward with interest. His teacher has told me that he is underachieving and he became combative when I told him we were bringing him to the clinic." "That's understandable." "Understandable? In what way?" Rebecca inquired. "Well, if he's holding something inside, as you suggest, then coming here would risk its exposure. It's understandable that he would feel threatened by that." Rebecca touched her chin with a forefinger. She hadn't thought of that. She just figured that Andy didn't like the idea of the clinic itself. "Do you think he's hiding something?" she asked. "Let's explore that." Dr. Rivera retrieved a manila folder from her desk and returned to her seat. Children in Andy's age group often have difficulty expressing things in words, so I always start by having them draw pictures. She handed Rebecca a sheet of paper with a stick drawing of 2 adult women and 1 female child. "This is what Andy produced when I asked him to draw a picture of his family." "He's not in it," Rebecca said. "Exactly," Dr. Rivera acknowledged. "And when I asked him why, he said it was because he is invisible." "What?" Rebecca chuckled in disbelief. "Is he fantasizing about having some kind of superpower?" "Perhaps, but it also could relate to his feelings." "What do you mean?" Rebecca said, her anxiety level beginning to climb again. There are two main possibilities, Dr. Rivera explained. He could feel invisible, because he thinks no one pays attention to him or cares about him. I care about him, Rebecca protested. I know you do, Dr. Rivera consoled, leaning forward and touching Rebecca's hand. This isn't about you. It's about Andy's feelings and perceptions. Well, what's the other possibility? He could be saying he's invisible as a sense of pride or rebellion. In other words, he may believe that he's successfully hiding something and that's what is invisible. I see, Rebecca said. Do you think it could be both? It's possible, but it's still too soon to know. Look at this one. Dr. Rivera passing another sheet of paper to her. Rebecca studied the picture. It was a crude stick figure that filled the page, with its torso portrayed as a large open square. What does it mean? Dr. Rivera folded her hands on her lap. This is what Andy produced when I asked him to draw what he feels inside. There's nothing there. He doesn't feel anything, Rebecca exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes. Let's not jump to conclusions, Dr. Rivera advised, handing her a tissue. This last picture is what he drew when I asked him to repeat the exercise, only this time I requested that he draw what he felt deep inside and didn't want anyone to know about, not what he allowed others to see. He resisted at first, but take a look at it. The picture was the same as the previous one, except that inside the square torso was a mass of tangled lines in different colors. Rebecca gasped. This is worse. Dr. Rivera reached out and squeezed her hand. No. It's not as bad as you think. This is progress. Progress? Rebecca whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Yes. This picture indicates that Andy feels a lot of conflict and anger. Look how hard he pressed on some of the lines. But it's nonspecific. It's all mixed up. Rebecca sniffled. I see. Now that we know this, we can help Andy to untangle all of those feelings and deal with them individually. There is hope. Do you really think so? Of course, I do, Dr. Rivera replied. Oh, thank you so much. I knew I was right bringing Andy to you. It may require several sessions. Are you prepared for that? I'll do anything to help my son, Rebecca said. Good. I'd like to see Andy again next week. Dr. Rivera scribbled some notes on a pad. I also recommend that you keep an eye on him. Definitely. Don't confront him about these pictures. He needs to be able to trust me. Okay. But I can't pretend that he's not seeing you. Of course not, Dr. Rivera said. You can talk about the visits in a general sense. Just don't go into specifics. In the meantime, try to connect with him. Take an interest in what he's doing. Ask for his opinions. But don't overdo it. I understand, Rebecca said. Dr. Rivera rose from her seat. Well, that's about it. We'll see each other again next week. If you have questions or are experiencing problems, don't hesitate to call me. Rebecca stood and held Dr. Rivera's hand between both of hers. I really appreciate your help, Dr. Rivera. Don't worry. Andy's going to be okay. Andy lay in his bed wearing his faux red skirt and panties. He had done this every night since nearly being caught by Jenna and his mother independently on the same day a couple of weeks ago. He felt frustrated. Despite his best efforts to be invisible, he had drawn the attention of those around him. Everyone seemed to be worried about him, at home and at school. They acted as though they were walking on eggshells around him. They always were asking about his feelings. And there was no escaping the heightened scrutiny. Even Jenna seemed to be in on it. He uncomfortably had less time alone now than he did before. Andy felt more controlled than ever. Although he longed to be treated like his sister Sarah, a beautiful flower that required delicate treatment, he instead was being treated like a bomb, one that if treated incorrectly would explode. He knew that this was the real reason why his mom had arranged for him to see Dr. Rivera. Everyone thought he was a psycho. The visit had not been anything like he thought it would. He had visions of torture chambers before his appointment. But to his surprise, it was nothing like that. Dr. Rivera was really nice and wore exquisite clothes. In fact, she looked like a model. Andy had experienced trouble paying attention because he was so enchanted with her. Without realizing it, she had made him feel so comfortable that he almost told her everything. Fortunately, he had come to his senses before he ruined his life. He was going to have to exert more control during his next visit. She obviously thought he was a psycho too, and he had to exercise caution not to be tricked by her. Andy also was frustrated for another reason. Although wearing his sister's panties and a red towel wrapped around his waist had been exhilarating and affirming at first, it had gotten old pretty fast. He had been fantasizing about going outside as himself, a girl, for the past year, but it had remained just that, a fantasy. However, the desire to actually do this had become almost overwhelming in the last 2 weeks. He wanted to do it more than anything, to proclaim to the world that he was a girl. Sure, he would be exposed. Everyone would see him, but to them he would be invisible. How? Because he would look and behave like any other girl. Andy painstakingly had observed the girls at school. They never worried about being caught wearing a dress or skirt. Girls were expected to dress that way. Andy rationalized that as long as he didn't believe that he was doing anything wrong when he went outside, then no one would notice him. Only if he panicked would people notice him. Otherwise, he would be both visible and invisible simultaneously. The biggest challenge was his hair. He had a classic Beatles-style haircut that parted at the crown and fell around his head in all directions. This meant that he had bangs, which was a good thing. However, his hair only was about 3 to 4 inches long and not very girlish in style, especially for someone his age. Sarah, for example, had long flowing locks that extended to the middle of her back. This provided for a lot of flexibility in how her hair could be fixed. Andy, on the other hand, had little flexibility. For this reason, he had been practicing with a scarf in the bathroom the past week. This would effectively hide his hair, but still keep everything in a feminine context. The hardest thing had been learning to tie it in a way that it would hold. It always looked great at first, but because he lacked sufficient hair in the back to act as an anchor against which to tie the knot, the scarf always wound up becoming loose after a few minutes. This would be completely unacceptable when he went outside. He finally solved the problem by holding the scarf on his head with bobby pins. Even this proved difficult at first. However, with practice he had learned to do it quick and without the use of a mirror. This was important because he would not have immediate access to a mirror where he planned to change. With the hair situation solved, the plan was set. Tomorrow was Sarah's ballet class. He would use that opportunity to sneak an entire complement of clothes from her room for the big day. Although Jenna would be watching him, he would simply wait for the inevitable phone call to come from one of her friends. Then, once she began talking, he would mouth silently that he was going to the bathroom. He wouldn't have much time, but he had gone over and over in his head exactly what he was going to get. He was going to wear a navy blue tiered skirt with white polka dots and ruffles all around, matched with a white long-sleeve tee featuring a negative screen print image of a large white butterfly on a navy, purple, teal mixed background. He had seen Sarah wear this outfit and it was gorgeous. He would complement the outfit with matching panties and cami, white knee socks and black Mary Janes. Since he knew exactly what he was looking for, he would be able to retrieve everything quickly. The following day would be his introduction to the world. He had rehearsed the route that he planned to take many times in his head. He would get dressed in the bathrooms at the park. Although he wasn't supposed to enter them by himself, his special day merited an exception. He would then walk 3 blocks and take a left, which would put him on sorority row of the university. Walking past the sorority houses really was important to Andy, because he needed to know that they would accept him. In this case, acceptance constituted ignoring him, not noticing anything out of the ordinary as he passed the houses. Once he finished walking the runway of sorority row, he would take a right, walk 3 blocks, and then take another right. This would be the longest part of his trek. He had chosen it because the university athletic fields were to his left. The football team would be practicing, and he wanted to proclaim to them by his mere presence that he was a girl and not a boy. After walking straight for a while, he finally would turn right on 4th Street, which eventually would lead back to the park and the bathrooms where he would change. He would prove to the world that he was a girl. Everyone would know, but at the same time would not know. He would be so pretty, so girlish, that no one would think to question anything about him. It was a perfect plan. However, there was one hitch. He had to convince his grandma to allow him to go to the park alone. This would be a challenge, given that everyone was watching him so closely, but he believed that he could convince her. And this wasn't even the biggest problem that he faced. Even if she permitted him to go to the park, he still had to get his stash of clothes out of the house. His first solution was to sneak the bag out to the garage before he asked his grandma to go to the park. He could then retrieve the bag as he was leaving without her knowing it. Unfortunately, it would not be that easy. This is because it was likely that his grandma would be watching him from the living room window as he walked down the street to the park. There would be no way to hide the bag from her notice. Seeing it would pique her curiosity and prompt her to get in the car and investigate it, particularly now that he was under greater scrutiny. That would destroy everything. The essence of his plan was for everyone to know that he was a girl, except his family. They never would accept him. Andy finally solved this problem by deciding that he would exit the garage without the bag and walk down the street so that his grandma could watch him. Then, when he was out of sight, he would wait a couple of minutes and then circle back to the garage and pick up the bag. Everyone would be happy. Andy hung his bag of clothes inside a stall in the women's bathroom at the park and set about stripping out of his clothes. His hands were shaking and his heart was beating fast. He wasn't prepared for this reaction and worried that he might not be able to calm down sufficiently to leave the bathroom and go on his walk. However, it was critical that he do this. If he was nervous, it would draw attention, and that is not at all what he wanted. Things had gone well so far. The only real challenge had been getting his grandma to let him go to the park alone. She had insisted on driving him there with Sarah, so that they all could enjoy time in the park. Andy was dejected. He could not complain too much, because that might make his grandma suspicious. It looked like the entire plan was going to collapse, but in the end Sarah saved him. She stubbornly protested that Grandma had promised to watch the Little Mermaid movie with her after she practiced her piano lesson. Andy then piled on and complained that he did not want to be treated like a baby. In the end, his grandma had acquiesced. "I've got to get moving," Andy admonished himself in a whisper, attempting to jolt himself out of his nervous apprehension. After arriving in the park with his bag of clothes, he had hovered near the women's bathroom for what seemed like hours waiting for it to become unoccupied. He had decided to change in the women's bathroom because he rationalized that it would be easier to sneak in there with his boy clothes on than to sneak out of the men's room wearing a skirt. But he needed to hurry. He already had lost valuable time going back to the garage to get his bag of clothes and then waiting outside the women's room. Additionally, he was hoping to leave the bathroom without encountering anyone. Andy stepped into the white cotton panties and slid them over his buttocks. He was praying that his pee-pee would stay asleep today and was relieved that it did not jump to attention as usual. The panties were white with teal trim and were speckled with small hearts in different colors. Next, he pulled the simple lace-lined white cami over his head, followed by the pretty white long-sleeve top with the screen-printed butterfly image. He carefully sat on the toilet seat to put on the knee socks. This perplexed him at first. He tried to stick his foot in the sock and it stuck. "Why didn't I think to put these on at home?" he whispered. In fact, he wondered why he hadn't put the underclothes on at home too. Stupid! 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 He chided himself. Finally, he figured out how to roll them, stick his toe in, and pull them up. It was surprisingly easy and he began to calm down. He almost was done. Andy slipped on the shoes and then stepped into the beautiful multi-tiered skirt. He shivered as he felt it caress his legs. Then, it happened. His pee-pee jumped to attention. "Oh no! Not again!" he thought. He couldn't possibly leave the bathroom with that crazy thing sticking out like that. The plan was ruined. Andy's eyes began to fill with tears. "Wait a sec. I'll be right out," a girl said as she entered the bathroom. Andy quickly sat down on the seat. He was paralyzed with fright. The girl entered the stall 2 doors down from him. "Ew," she shouted. Andy heard the door to the stall next to him open. What was he going to do? What was he going to do? The girl entered and he soon heard the familiar tinkle of urine passing. "Hey," the girl whispered. "Hey." Andy fumbled for words. "Do you mean me?" "Duh," she replied. "Like, is there anybody else in here?" Andy didn't know what to say. "There's no paper over here. Can you pass me some?" Andy saw a hand appear under the wall of the stall. Sure." Andy rolled out some tissue and placed it in her hand. "Thanks." Shortly after, the girl flushed, washed her hands at the sink, and exited the women's room. Phew! I didn't plan for that, he thought. But wasn't that the point? Girls didn't have to plan for things like this. It was just part of being a girl. Andy shook his head in wonderment. He only had been outside for a short time and already it seemed that he had forgotten all of his plan. "I'm a girl," he whispered. "I belong like this. I have to remember that." A benefit of the girl coming in was that his pee-pee problem had disappeared. He was grateful for this and decided to finish his dressing and get out of there before anyone else entered. The only thing remaining was his hair. He took the blue nylon scarf with red trim and white polka dots, positioned it on his head, and then tied a tight knot in the back. The scarf was a slightly different shade of blue than the skirt he was wearing, but it was close enough to look like a match. Andy was proud of himself for achieving this look. After inserting the bobby pins, he grabbed his bag and exited the stall. Andy halted after a couple of steps. What am I going to do with this bag? He wondered. I can't walk around carrying a bag full of boy clothes. This was another thing that he had not considered. He couldn't risk trying to hide the bag in the park. What if somebody found it? He'd really be in trouble. Andy contemplated taking the bag with him anyway, but he just did not think that it would work. The bag would look out of place, which meant that it would draw undue attention. He would be visible in a negative way, instead of the positive way that he wanted. He quickly scanned the women's room for a hiding spot, but didn't see one. Then, his eyes fell on the trash can. It was a typical round Rubbermaid garbage can with a red top that had a push-through door. Andy walked over to it, lifted off the top, and looked inside. It did not contain any nasty trash, only wadded-up paper towels. He carefully tipped the garbage can on its side, pulled the towels toward him, and set the bag behind them. He then returned it to an upright condition and checked inside. Perfect! His bag was camouflaged by the towels. He situated the top back on and then went to the sink to wash his hands. He checked the positioning of the scarf covering his head, turned to leave, and was face to face with a woman with a daughter about Sarah's age. "Oh, what an absolutely darling outfit," she exclaimed with a smile. "Don't you think so, Kristen?" The daughter nodded in agreement. Andy blushed and looked down at his feet. "Thank you. Would you turn around, please? I'd like to get a good look at it." Andy slowly made a 360-degree turn. "Gorgeous," the woman exclaimed. "Absolutely gorgeous. Do you know where your mother bought it?" "Ah, I'm not sure. Could you wait for just a minute until we're finished? Maybe I can go outside with you and ask her." "She's not out there," Andy said, panicking. The woman furrowed her brow. "You're out here alone?" "No, my mom and sister started walking home and I'm supposed to catch up with them." "I got to go." Andy ran from the women's room and did not look back. He sighed with relief after a few seconds when he did not hear the woman's voice calling him. Andy started to relax. In fact, he felt more confident with each step that he took. He was walking down sorority row and no one was paying attention to him. He was visible, yet invisible. This was fun. Andy was overjoyed by the acceptance he received from this community of girly girls. This was the most important part of his trek. He was so happy that he started to skip, but he wasn't accustomed to indulging in this simple girlish behavior. His feet became tangled and he fell forward onto the sidewalk. Two sorority girls seemed to magically appear and helped him to his feet. "Are you all right, sweetie?" "I think so," Andy replied, brushing dust off his skirt. "Come over here with us and let's check you out," one of them said. "By the way, I'm Kathy and she's Regina." "What's your name?" "Andrea." "Cute," Regina said. The two women flanked Andy and guided him toward the porch of the sorority house. He had no choice but to go with them. He was nervous beyond description, but resisted panic. This was a true test. "I'm a girl," he reminded himself. "I'm supposed to be dressed like this." They had Andy sit on a folding chair and checked his legs for scrapes and bruises. "You're lucky," Kathy said. "Your legs look okay." "Yeah, but she scraped her wrist," Regina commented. "It's okay," Andy said. "No, it's not," Kathy contradicted. "It's dirty and might get infected." "Come with me, Andrea. Let's wash it and put a band-aid on it." She took Andy by the hand and led him into the sorority house. Upon exiting the bathroom with a band-aid on his wrist, Andy said, "Thanks so much, Kathy. I'd better be going now." "Wait. Why the rush?" Regina said. She gently touched his shoulder and guided him in the opposite direction from the front door. "We were just about to have some Oreos and milk. Don't you want to join us?" Andy was thirsty and a little hungry. And Oreos were his favorite cookie. Why not? He thought. He entered the kitchen and saw 3 other women seated around a large table with a pack of Oreos and bottle of milk in the middle. "Hey, save some for us," Kathy called out. "Hi everybody," Regina said. "I'd like you to meet our new friend, Andrea." "Hi Andrea," the 3 women chimed. Come on, let's get you some cookies, Regina said, guiding Andy to a chair. Andy knelt in the chair so that he could reach the cookies and be at the same level as the other girls. One of them commented, "That's a pretty outfit you're wearing, Andrea." "Thanks," Andy said sheepishly. He ate slow and sparingly, remembering that his grandma always told him not to be a pig when he was a guest. "So, do you live around here, Andrea?" Kathy inquired. "Not real close," Andy said cautiously. "I live over on 6th Street with my mom, grandma, and little sister." Regina frowned with concern. "Does anyone know you're all the way over here?" Yeah. I'm here with my mom. I'm waiting for her to get off work." "Do you mean she works here at the university?" Regina asked. "Yes. At the provost." Kathy gave Andy a puzzled look. "Why are you all the way down here, Andrea?" I think sororities are really cool. I want to belong to one someday." "That's so cute," one of the other women exclaimed. Everyone was smiling except Regina, who still had a look of concern. "Does your mom know you're down here?" Yeah," Andy replied. "In fact, I'd better be getting back now." He lowered himself to the floor. "Thank you very much for cookies." Kathy squatted and hugged him. "Anytime, sweetheart. You're an honorary member of the sorority now, so you can come back whenever you want." "Gee, thanks," Andy said with a big smile on his face. He felt so happy, so accepted. He almost did not want to leave. But it was getting late and he had to finish his walk. Kathy and Regina accompanied him out to the porch and gave him hugs again. Andy turned to leave when he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe we should walk up there with you," Regina said. "No, it's okay," Andy said, his heart pounding inside his chest. "I know the way." "Well, okay," Regina said. "You go straight there, okay?" Andy nodded his understanding and bounded down the steps. When he reached the sidewalk, he turned and waved to them. "Bye-bye." Kathy and Regina watched Andy walking down Sorority Row. "Such a sweet girl," Kathy sighed. "As sweet as they come," Regina agreed. Kathy folded her arms. "She's not walking toward the provost's office." "I know. Do you think we did the right thing? I know that we gave her a memory that she will cherish for a long time." "Yes," Kathy turned to Regina. "But did we do the right thing?" Regina made eye contact. "She's going to face a lot of challenges in her life. We didn't need to add to them." The two turned and went inside the house. Andy was full of joy. He had just received the acceptance that he had so long yearned to receive. This walk was turning out better than he ever could have imagined. He was now an honorary member of a sorority. He hoped that he could return back there as soon as possible. As Andy approached the athletic fields, he experienced his first disappointment. Football practice apparently had ended and there only were a few people in the area taking care of equipment. He wouldn't be able to proudly display his femininity to the football players as he had planned. Although Andy felt dejected, his passage by the athletic fields still would have some symbolic significance. He would have to be satisfied with that. It must be late, if practice is over, Andy thought. He realized that it was starting to get dark and started walking faster. "Grandma will get worried if I don't show up soon." A black Lexus sedan was coming toward him, so Andy moved off the shoulder of the road and walked on the grass. The car slowed almost to a stop when it reached Andy and then sped off. What was that all about, he wondered. He gently touched his head to verify that the scarf still was in place and then made a quick check of his clothes to make sure nothing was out of order. Satisfied, he continued his trek. He felt a great sense of pride about the courage he had displayed to present himself to the world today. His mind now was filled with plans for how he would do it again, and again, and again. Andy snapped out of his reverie when he realized that a car had come up behind him and was pacing him as he walked. It was the black Lexus. Andy felt anxious. He looked forward and continued walking, acting as if the car wasn't there. Fortunately, he still walked on the grass and the car was on the other side of the road, going in his direction, so there was at least some distance separating them. He heard the window of the car descending. In his peripheral vision he saw a chubby-faced man with a receding hairline. His cheeks appeared flushed, as if he had been engaged in some sort of physical exertion. "Hi, cutie," he called over to Andy. Andy kept walking and did not acknowledge him. "I've got a puppy in the back seat. He's cute as can be, just like you. Would you like to see him?" Andy and Sarah had been pestering their mother about getting a dog for what seemed like ages, but they had not convinced her yet. Although he really wanted to see the puppy, the man, with his squeaky voice, made him uneasy. He picked up his pace and was ready to run if the man stopped the car. "My puppy's name is Sparky. What's yours, little girl?" the man inquired. Andy kept walking. "Come on, cutie. Just come over and take a quick look. Please?" Andy was full of panic. He searched for some way that he could escape. He quickly looked behind him and saw that a car was approaching. "There's a car coming," Andy warned. The man looked in his rearview mirror to confirm it. "I'll be right back," he said. The car accelerated. As soon as the other car passed, Andy crossed the street and ran toward his 4th Street turn. It was about 100 meters ahead and he did not want to be on this road when the black Lexus returned. Andy rounded 4th Street and ran nearly another block before stopping. Panting, he turned and looked back just in time to see the black Lexus pass by on the street below. He was safe. Having caught his breath, he set out to walk the final 3 blocks to the park. It was dark enough now that the street lights had come on. Andy had to make it to the women's bathroom, change his clothes, and get home. He had almost reached Tulip Street when he saw a girl on a bicycle round the turn and head toward him. Andy gasped. "It's Cindy Whitcomb." He made a 180-degree turn and walked away from his destination, hoping that she had not seen him. Cindy was in his class at school. If she had seen him, he was dead. 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 But she sped past him and gave no indication of it. Andy stopped and sighed with relief. "What am I doing?" he thought. He was acting nervous, exactly the type of behavior that would upset his invisible plan. He had to calm down. "I am a girl," he whispered. "I'm supposed to be dressed like this." Andy turned and headed back toward the park. If Cindy came by again, he would just keep walking. Rebecca Robinson entered the park frantically looking for her son. She had a flashlight in her hand, but the park lights provided sufficient illumination that she didn't really need it. "Andy! Andy!" she called out. Of all the nights to arrive home late from work. Her mother and Sarah had been watching the Little Mermaid DVD and completely had forgotten that Andy was out in the park. Why did Mom let him go there alone in the first place? She asked herself. Andy was very fragile right now. A lot of things were going on inside him. Letting him go alone to the park had been a real lapse in judgment on her mother's part. But she would have to deal with that later. Right now, she had to devote all of her attention to finding Andy. She really didn't know where to look. The park seemed pretty empty. Sure, a few people sat on the benches, but they all were adults. She didn't see any children, especially children that were by themselves. Rebecca walked deeper into the park full of dread. Her mind was swimming with thoughts of bad things that might have happened to her son. Andy! Andy! Her cell phone rang. She saw that it was a call from her mother and answered it immediately. "Is he there?" she asked anxiously. "No," her mother said. "I was calling to see if you found him." "Not yet. I'm still looking. I feel sick about this, Becky. I shouldn't have let him go." "Don't worry about that now," Rebecca said. "Let's just find him and get him home safe." "You're right. Do you think we should call the police?" "Not yet. Let me search here for a few more minutes. If I don't find him, then we'll call them." "Be careful, honey." "Okay, Mom." Rebecca turned a full circle, trying to figure out what to do. She caught sight of a girl at the far end of the park. She appeared to be in a hurry because she was walking fast. Rebecca couldn't tell for sure, but the girl looked like she might be about Andy's age. She decided to catch up to her and ask if she had seen her son. Andy entered the park and headed straight for the bathrooms. It was late and he knew that he was in trouble. Nevertheless, the walk had been exhilarating and well worth any punishment that he would receive. What was he going to tell his mom when she asked where he had been? He knew that he could not say that he'd been in the park all the time. There was a possibility that his grandma and Sarah had been there looking for him. No, he'd probably be caught in that lie. Andy was so focused on trying to come up with a believable excuse for coming home so late that he failed to notice the woman approaching diagonally to his left. "Excuse me." "Excuse me," the woman called, shining a flashlight light in his direction. There was a split second that seemed to pass in slow motion. In it, mother recognized son and son recognized mother. "Andy?" Andy bolted, as if shot out of a cannon. He heard his mother frantically calling after him. "Andy! Please stop! Why are you running?" Andy was in the flight version of the fight or flight response. He wasn't thinking. He was just reacting. "Andy! Stop!" He made a beeline for the bathrooms, entered the women's room, and leaped into a stall. He sat on the seat, pulled his knees up to his chin, and shook with fear. "Andy," he heard his mother call as she entered the women's room. There was a long pause, and then she said, "I know you're in here, Andy, so you might as well come out. I'm not mad at you. I'm just glad that I found you and you're okay." "Oh sure," Andy thought. "She's just saying that to get me to come out. And when I do, she'll send me to a house for crazy people and I'll never see her, Sarah, or Grandma again." He started to whimper. "Oh sweetheart, don't cry." Andy could tell that his mother was crying too. "Just come out. We'll go home and figure this out." Andy didn't know what to do. He was tired and scared out of his mind. "I can't," Andy bawled. "I'm afraid." "I'm afraid too." "Really?" Andy sniffled. "Of course. I don't know what's going on. I was worried sick that something had happened to you. I'm just happy that I found you and you're all right. I don't want to go to the crazy house." Andy wailed. "What?" I don't understand what you mean, sweetheart. You're going to send me to the crazy house. That's not true. I'm not going to send you anywhere. I love you. I just want to give you a big hug you and take you home." Accepting that he had no choice, Andy stood and slowly opened the door to the stall. The first thing he saw was his mother's face, contorted with worry and with tears streaming down it. Rivulets of tears flowed down his face as well, as he ran into his mother's embrace. "I'm sorry, Mommy,"